Welcome back, Dynasty Fantasy Football players. Today we have the next episode of our veteran buy and sell series. Moving on to the tight end position. If you have not already watched the wide receivers and running backs videos, there is both a buy and sell for each of them posted on this channel. Go show those videos some love and make sure you are not falling behind during this Dynasty offseason. Before we get too deep into the video, if you haven't already joined our awesome Discord community, go ahead and click the link in the description here. Totally free to join. We've got Dynasty trades going all the time at all hours of the day and night. We are spinning up new listener leagues. We have a league finder tab for you guys to join new Dynasty leagues. And even more so, we are doing a special strategy session to say thank you for each and every one of you subscribers out there on the Discord every single Sunday. For 2 to 3 hours, I am going live, breaking down your guys' Dynasty rosters, hopping on with you on a screen share where you can talk one-on-one with me, and I can help generate real-life trades for your Dynasty leagues. You're not going to want to miss it. Without any further ado, let's dive right into the first player on this list, which is Jake Ferguson. And I know this is actually going to be a pretty hot take here, as a lot of people in the Dynasty community right now, I consume plenty of content as well, are telling you to sell Jake Ferguson, coming off a season where he gave you a top tight end finish. And yes, did he catch fire during the middle of the year during the injuries to CeeDee Lamb? Absolutely he did. Did he incur quite the fall off towards the end of the year, dropping from about 13.5 points per game during CeeDee Lamb's injury down to almost 9 points per game during the final stretch? That is also a correct statement. I do understand how some people would be panicking now, hearing that George Pickens is either going to come back on an extension or get the franchise tag, which is far more likely, and say, I don't want any piece of Jake Ferguson anymore. However, I love to play the market. Here at Dynasty Price Check, we always talk about understanding player values and when to buy and sell, not getting too attached and not being very, very, very emotional with our trading habits like I see left and right in leagues. So if we are to go to a community rankings tool, which again, I know a lot of you out there are going to see Keep Trade Cut here and say, Keep Trade Cut, that's a terrible trade calculator. I can't believe he's using this tool. I strongly disagree. I do think the trade calculator obviously leaves a lot to be desired. However, what this tool is truly good for and why we consult it is to understand market value from a crowd sourcing standpoint. And what you can see here is over the last 6 months, during the CeeDee Lamb injury, we watched Jake Ferguson rise significantly in value, actually all the way up to a late first-round pick's worth of value, even in a standard scoring format. However, as the production started to tail off and we entered the end of the season here, he's actually leveled out very, very nicely at an early second to mid-second round pick range. This immediately makes him a buy candidate for me. What a lot of people forget about Jake Ferguson is that he just signed an extension this last offseason. Dak Prescott has been known to love his tight ends, and that even shows in Jake Ferguson's production through the first couple seasons. Let's not forget that in the first 4 years, you've gotten 2 top 10 finishes out of Jake Ferguson. That is no small feat, even at the tight end position, which is typically a little bit more of a minefield. Now, again, what we do want to recognize is you are not buying him at peak value. You're actually getting a slight discount based off of the tapered off production and the fact that we're in the offseason and people are less concerned about scoring fantasy points until next September. This gives you a unique chance to buy. So if we are to go look at some... There we are. Apologies. We are going to see that there's a lot of guys in here that are extremely, extremely undervalued on the open market. This trade in particular, in a Superflex tight end premium, sending Gunnar Helm for Jake Ferguson in the 408. Now, I love Gunnar Helm as much as the next guy and actually think he has some decent upside on that Tennessee Titans offense. But for a proven product that's given me 2 top 10 finishes in the first 4 years of his career and is simply only 27 years old, I think is quite ludicrous. If we are to scroll down in a 1 QB format here and see Jake Ferguson moving for Chris Rodriguez just this week, I think that's laughable, as Chris Rodriguez at times, sure, gave you maybe a flex-worthy production this year in the absolute complete wasteland that was the Washington Commanders backfield, But to get a difference maker at the tight end position like Jake Ferguson is simply and utterly far more valuable. Now, again, if we are to look down here at another tight end premium format just 2 days ago, Jake Ferguson was moved straight up for Blake Corum. Now, I understand that Blake Corum gave a slight amount of production at the end of the year. It looked like he was sniping some of the touches away from Kyron Williams. However, this is more of a managed workload play by Sean McVay rather than actual threat. I think what we did see, similar to compare the situation to Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, obviously a far better runner than Blake Corum, don't get me wrong, not comparing the two, just saying was more of a work management and load management aspect for Kenneth Walker, saving him to the playoffs so that you could see the absolute explosion in MVP Super Bowl MVP quality that Kenneth Walker did have and lead the Seattle Seahawks to that title. Probably wouldn't have been as likely for him to get such a heavy workload during the playoffs if he was being used to the full degree during the regular season. I see Blake Corum in the same kind of realm. So if you are to flip a Blake Corum, that could give you a flex week or two here and there for a potential top 10 tight end for the next several years. And Jake Ferguson, I'm absolutely doing so. Now, the next guy we want to pull up and take a look at on this veterans list, thanks for sticking with me after the small technical difficulties of the beginning there, we are going to talk about Dalton Schultz here. A guy who, yes, might be a little bit of a flash in the pan this year. You could say, as some other creators are saying, oh, he finished tight end 10 at his age 29 season. However, people seem to have a very short memory in fantasy football and act like Dalton Schultz is the random veteran that did well this year out of nowhere. I actually think that's completely and utterly false, and during the last offseason was telling you to buy Dalton Schultz left and right because he actually only had a down year in 2024, finishing tight end 20. The previous seasons before that, he was giving you 3 top 10 finishes in a row. And sure, this is a tight end 11 finish, but damn near the same thing. We had 12 finish in 2020, number 3 finish in 2021, 11 and 10. What you're getting out of Dalton Schultz is a very solid upside tight end 2 every given season, minus the 1 down year in 2024. He returns to form this year, and he still is on contract with the Houston Texans going into next season after setting career high marks this year and could repeat that level of production. Now, yes, you have a Nico Collins and an ascending Jaden Higgins in that offense. However, with little to no competition at the tight end position and the contract insulation that Dalton Schultz possesses, I believe you can buy what you are getting out of him, which is an upside tight end too. And you could look at the age and say age 29, well, he's going to start declining. On the contrary, Juwan Johnson, at his age 29-30 season this year, just gave you the best season of his career. And as we've seen in the past with guys like Travis Kelce playing to age 35, Zach Ertz still being very productive until his injury this year at 36, it is far to say that the barely end of your 20s and early 30s for a tight end is trickling off. In fact, that sometimes shows that they're entering their prime, as fantasy data would suggest. Now, if we are to go over and take a look on the open market and see what Dalton Schultz has happened to his price action in the last few months, you are going to see a pretty similar sentiment in where he slowly rose throughout the season. If you were to have bought him during the offseason like I told you to last year, you could have gotten him for a late 3rd round pick. Absolutely nothing. Complete chump change. Now, after a season of production, he's leveled out around the 2,200 mark on the open market, placing him as a mid to late 3rd round range in 2027. That's highway robbery for a tight end that is giving you top 10 finishes in 4 of the last 5 years. Now, guys, let's be realistic here. The current pick value of the 304 to the 308, do you actually genuinely believe you're going to get a tight end on a team that's either stuck in the middle or a contending roster that could give you top 10 upside in this year's class in the late 3rd round? Now, you'd have to get extremely lucky with an Arondre Gadsden type pull for that to happen. Your statistical odds are very, very low. So if we are to go over and take a look at some of the real life trades that have happened just this week with Dalton Schultz, you can see Dalton Schultz being moved with the 306 for K-Dot and the 207. I have no problem making a small pick swap there and getting the more productive tight end on a tight end premium format on a contending roster. If you look one below at a 1 QB format, 12 team start 8, you are seeing Dalton Schultz move straight up for James Conner. That's crazy. I don't think James Conner's even going to come back and play football this season. So if I'm able to make that sort of flip, I'm fine doing so. If I scroll up again, I'm seeing Dalton Schultz move straight up for Brian Robinson. Sure, now he might say this is probably the Christian McCaffrey owner trying to get his handcuff. Yeah, potentially, but regardless, handcuffs don't give me anything until the main guy goes down. I would gladly take Dalton Schultz and ride him to the bank, as well as looking again up here earlier this week, seeing Dalton Schultz move for a 2027 third-round pick. Again, a tight end premium format where I am buying guaranteed tight end 2 worthy production. It is a smash except in my book, and I think you should be sending these offers today. The next guy we're going to talk about here, and keep in mind, guys, some of these names you're going to recognize early on, but make sure you stay to the end of the video because I'm going to have a couple honorable mentions for some very slept-on players that a lot of people are not even realizing are available out there. So we are going to talk about them soon, and just hang with me as we talk about George Kittle next. Obviously, a proven veteran who has given you nonstop top 10 production for the last 5 years running. This year suffers a flurry of injuries as well as ending the season with a true devastating Achilles tear. Now, you do hate to see it for a man that has been so productive for you in Dynasty Fantasy Football. However, at age 32, like we mentioned before, George Kittle being the athletic specimen he is and getting a contract extension simply done just last year does not give me the poise that he is anywhere near retirement. I would be very, very sure that George Kittle is going to come back and give you at least 2 more very solid years, if not 3, potentially at his level of athletic ceiling. Now, he has already been very vocal, as you guys see here in the article posted on Sleeper in the nice little news tab here, that he's anticipated to be back well before November of next year, meaning you could only miss the first half of the season for George Kittle, yet people are valuing him as a massive drop-off and that he will not even be playing next year. I don't think that'll be true. Knowing George Kittle, his personality, his work ethic, I do think he is going to come back earlier than expected. Whether that's a good decision or not for his overall health, I'm not going to make the verdict on that. I'm no doctor. But what I will say is what you have seen is after the injury, him take a significant value dip and finally enter a very comfortable buy window for George Kittle. As you can see here, his current pick value is between the 201 and the 205 in 2026. If I'm a contending roster, especially in a tight end premium, I'm not hesitating to send that offer, being patient and taking the back half of next year's production out of him, or his future pick value of an early to mid second round pick in 2027. Again, if this is more on the mid round pick side there, I have no issue doing it. If we are to go consult real life trades that have been happening for George Kittle this week in a 1 quarterback format here, no tight end premium, he was moved for Braylon Allen. Now again, Braylon Allen, not a bad guy to stash. In fact, he might be a topic of one of our upcoming stash videos on future potential upside starters if Breece Hall were to vacate the New York Jets running room. However, George Kittle, for a guy that has yet to even give you a sustained stretch of 4 games of fantasy scoring, is a little bit hesitant for me as a George Kittle owner in multiple leagues myself. Now, if we are to go one above, we see George Kittle moving straight up for a 2026 second round pick. Now, it doesn't say where this pick is placed. I'm assuming mid to early. Regardless, I'd be happy doing that deal, especially again, overlooking here at a tight end premium format, we see George Kittle moving for Christian Watson straight up. And yes, Christian Watson showed flashes to be a deep downfield threat last season, finally putting together a stretch where he's not dealing with injury left and right. The poor man has had a devastating career in that department, but that sort of boom bust production is not exactly what I'm looking for outside of an extremely deep format, maybe like a start 11 or a start 12. What I would prefer is getting a bona fide tight end 1, even if it's guaranteed only for 8 games next season, which I do think George Kittle can give you. Finally, looking down below, I'm seeing him move for the 2026 212. That's laughable. Moving for guys above like Woody Marks and Caleb Johnson for George Kittle and Colby Parkinson in a 12-team start 13 Superflex tight end premium format. Woody Marks was extremely inefficient last year and is already a very old running back. Caleb Johnson showed you damn near nothing that season. I'll take Colby Parkinson, who is ascending, and George Kittle any day of the week to reload on a contending roster. The next guy that we are going to dive into here is another guy who just signed an extension this season, and that is Mark Andrews, a guy who did have a little bit of a down year comparatively to what we've come to expect from him in the past, seeing that through 2019 all the way till 2023, he was giving you guaranteed top 10 production with one down year there as an injury-riddled season, followed by another top 6 finish. Now, this year's the first year he actually plays the full 17 games and finishes outside the top 10. During an extremely injury-riddled Lamar Jackson season, let's not forget, and an entire regime change coming in Baltimore with hopefully some more offensive firepower entering the building. Now, after getting that extension and only being age 30, like we mentioned with the Juwan Johnson example. I still expect 2 to 3 very solid years here out of Mark Andrews, and right now you can get him for pennies on the dollar. If we are to check his open market value, you can see that Mark Andrews is in a very comfortable buy range, especially for teams in the middle or contending. Seeing that early in the year before the season kicked off, he was sitting right here in that early second round pick range, right around 3,000 points. However, throughout the course of the season, even despite getting an extension and moving into the offseason, he's fallen all the way down to 2,400 community value points, which, sure, just to translate for you guys, translates to the current pick value of the 212 to the 304, or a late 27 second or early 27 third. That is quite frankly laughable, guys, and this is the lucky part of the offseason where we can capitalize on people not being so caught up in getting points on their roster immediately and being willing to take risk on future picks and hold liquidity in a different facet. Now, I myself love to take these opportunities to buy low on productive veterans, especially when I am normally in a retooling process on some team that's either stuck in the middle or contending. Now, if we are to go look at real-life trades happening for Mark Andrews right now, we will see that the community sentiment is echoed in some proven examples here. Here's a tight end premium Superflex 12-team league where he was moved straight up for the 304. That is crazy to me. You can look over here at a guy who, yes, I like Mike Evans as much as the next guy and think he's going to give you a nice little one-year rental here, assuming that he can stay healthy and avoid these hamstring injuries, which have been such a plague during his career. But Deebo Samuel, I want nothing to do with. If you saw during my veteran wide receiver sell video, in a one-quarterback league, we see Mike Evans and Deebo Samuel moving for Mark Andrews in the 305. I'll take the difference maker at the tight end position. Now, again, scrolling up to another one-quarterback league here, we see Mark Andrews moving up straight up for the 2026 310 pick. Again, guys, if you genuinely believe at the 310 in this year's draft, you are going to get a guy that has given you, not exaggerating, and this is real life here, given you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 top 10 finishes in the last 7 years, and 2 of the years have either been for a major injury for himself or for his star quarterback. You are quite mistaken. I think this is the trap that happens left and right in Dynasty Fantasy Football as we have such a short memory. Again, looking here at Chris Rodriguez, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and a 28th third-round pick in a tight end premium format, moving for Mark Andrews in the 401. To my JCM truthers out there, please give it a rest. We saw everything we wanted to see out of him this season. The game script went exactly how you could imagine you would want out of the man, and he did not give you any production. He's already an extremely old prospect. I do believe that they will address the running back position, whether it be through the draft or free agency this year, probably with Rachaad White, who was one of my buys in the veteran running back video that I posted just the other day, so go check that out. But I am over the JCM hype train, never was on it, told you to sell him at the beginning when you could potentially flip him for a first-round pick like I saw happen multiple times during the preseason wave, and instead now I would gladly take what I can get for him, including a top 10 potential finisher in Mark Andrews at the position. The next guy we're going to talk about, and the final guy before we move on to these honorable mentions, which are going to be some sleepers for you guys, is David Njoku, who did post his farewell message to Cleveland just the other day saying, "Thank you guys for the memories, but I am out of the building." And this bodes extremely well for David Njoku's career to potentially test free agency and move to a more productive offensive structure. Now, at only age 29 years old, you could say, oh, David Njoku is an old player. He is washed. Not at all, guys. As I mentioned with the Juwan Johnson example, sometimes tight ends are just starting to enter their prime and can give you some of their career-defining seasons in their early 30s. David Njoku, as a fantastic athlete, is absolutely not a stranger to being a potential player that could do so. If we are to look at his previous production from 2022 onward, he gave you a tight end 10 finish, a tight end 6 finish, a tight end 11 finish. That is damn near 3 top 10 finishes in a row before a down year this year where they bring in an extremely talented Harold Fannin. He misses 5 games to injury. And obviously the Browns offense is the Browns offense, still being wildly depleted and struggling at quarterback problems. Now, if we are to take a look at the open market and see where David Njoku is being valued today, you can see that he has taken a significant value drop throughout the course of the season. Entering the season, even after drafting Harold Fannin here in early to late August, he was being valued around an early second-round pick. Now, by the end of the season, he's dropped all the way down to being a late second, early third-round value. His current pick value is 212 to the 304, and his future pick value is the 227 late second to a 27 early third. all those prices in a tight end premium, I would have absolutely no issue paying. Now, if we are to go look at real life trade examples, we can take a look that in a one quarterback format here, in a start 8 only, we are seeing David Njoku move for Chimere DK, which again, I actually like Chimere DK. He might be one of the players that we see on our stashes video for deep formats coming up here. However, in a start 8 format like this one, I will take a player that is most likely going to still have a chance to start for me in David Njoku at the tight end position if all things fall right, versus a probably perpetual wide receiver 2, if anything, at the Tennessee Titans in Chimere DK, who has looked good in the kicking game, but let's not joke around that they're probably not going to address that wide receiver issue in Tennessee this offseason. Now, looking down to just 3 days ago, where in a Superflex 12-team start 10, we see David Njoku being traded for the 304 and the 404 in this year's draft. Again, another trade I would be totally fine making. Over here in a Superflex tight end premium, you have David Njoku moving for both Alvin Kamara, Kenneth Gainwell, and then in this example here, moving for Torrey Horton in a 4th round pick. Now, I love Torrey Horton as much as the next guy. In fact, I am a huge Torrey Horton truther that have been telling you this for over a year now, after he absolutely put Travis Hunter in the blender at Colorado State. However, in a Superflex tight end premium format, I am not above saying that it is more likely that, especially in the next 2 years, if you are somewhere in the middle or a contending roster, David Njoku in that premium format is going to score you far more points than Torrey Horton will in a Seattle offense that is run around Jackson Smith and Jigba, the running game, A.J. Barner being a relevant player, Rashid Shaheed probably getting extended, Cooper Kupp having another year on his deal. You know, there is plenty of mouths to feed in that offense. Not to say Torrey Horton won't be a third-year potential breakout candidate, but in the immediate, we can always buy him back later on and still use Njoku on our contending run. Now, let's hop into the honorable mentions section of this video, which is actually, I think, probably where you're going to make your most bang for your buck. And the first player that we're going to talk about here out of the two is a player that's been forgotten behind the massive hype train that has begun in Chicago behind Colson Loveland. But Cole Kmet is actually quite a solid prospect and has given you solid production in the past. If we do not forget, in 2022, Cole Kmet gave you a top 10 finish with tight end 7, and in 2023 gave you a top 10 end finish with tight end 8. Now, obviously, over the last couple of years, both with Chicago struggling from a horrible offense last year, bringing Brendan Johnson in to retool the entire team and roster, and then this year being stuck behind Colson Loveland, you were bound to see 2 dips in performances from him, which you did, and this has actually made his value wildly palatable from a buying standpoint. At the same time, we also have to consider the cap implications of Cole Kmet this offseason, where yes, he was extended just a year and a half ago by Chicago and is still under contract technically for the next year. However, they could vacate a solid amount of cap room this offseason by moving on from Cole Kmet and voiding that contract, as they do have a potential out in his structure. This is something that I actually anticipate Chicago to do now that they've brought Loveland in. And if you were to see a 26-year-old Cole Kmet, who still profiles as a great athlete at the tight end position, and quite frankly is a way above the skill level of what his fantasy value is projecting today, he could land with a team like, for example, in my mind, a tight end needy squad like the Cincinnati Bengals. And if he did so, that could provide him with significant fantasy upside as he enters almost that prime of his tight end career from 27 to 32. Now, this is a man that I don't think should be written off and is a great roster stash. And if we are to check his value on the open market, you can see you can get him for pennies on the dollar. Now, he's sitting right in this range of about 2,000 and 1,900 points of community value range, putting him at the current value of the 309 to the 401, or a late 27th third to early 4th. These sort of picks, guys, are extreme dice rolls, and especially if you play in a tight end premium format, I think you should be swinging hard on a guy like Cole Kmet right now. If we are to look at community rankings here and then flip over to the trade database, you can see that just 3 days ago, Cole Kmet in a tight end premium format was traded for the 304 straight up. I would gladly take that deal every day of the week and twice on Sunday. And again, if we look even below, again in a tight end premium format, Jalen Wright, John Mechie, Bam Knight. Those are all players I am not interested in holding, especially in a format where I could get starting production in the future out of Cole Kmet versus Jalen Wright Everything would have to go right. In fact, Devon Achane would have to go down. Ollie Gordon would have to go down. He'd have to suddenly rise up into some sort of workhorse role in a new regime that might even address the position further in free agency or the draft this year. All that to be said, this is the type of prices you can get for a guy that could one day be extremely relevant on your dynasty roster and is still just entering the prime of his career at only age 26. The final player I am going to highlight actually is a Cincinnati Bengals tight end from this season in Noah Fant, who gave you some streaming weeks this year. I know he finished tight end 37, which wasn't fantastic, but if we do look, you could see a couple weeks in the middle of the season here at 10 points, 18 points, 10, 12, and 10, giving you about 5 straight weeks where this man was a streaming option during the Mike Gesicki injury. What a lot of people forget is Noah Fant was a former first-round pick, profiled as a very talented athlete at the position, and does have great hands and athletic upside. And at age 28 years old, he should not be written off just yet. As we've talked about before, tight ends are typically still very relevant going into their early 30s and can perform at the position still quite well. Now, right now, Noah Fant's value is next to nothing, and I'm not telling you that Noah Fant is the savior of your team by any means. However, if you can flip your current value of less than the 412 or less than a future late 4th round pick to just bring Noah Fant in on a tight end premium format, I would be doing so. As you can see here, there is plenty of trades for Noah Fant that aren't even listed because nobody's trading for him, because there is none out there. Here for the 501, people playing with 5th round picks in rookie drafts are really getting deep out there. My hat tips off to you. I only go to round 4 in my listener leagues. However, I'm not going to beat a dead horse on this one. We don't need to go too deep into this stash. However, if you're a holder of multiple 4th round picks or just other players that are quite irrelevant, like deep roster cloggers down there, and want to take a swing on a guy in a tight end premium format that still could have some future upside, I suggest doing so. Thank you guys so much for coming along for this video. I know that one was a little bit of a long one, but I do think there's some interesting buy options on the tight end market this offseason. While all the major headlines are going to go to players like Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, why am I blanking now? Brock Bowers and Trey McBride. There you go. But while there's plenty of major players in the game there, I think some of the more sleepy, affordable options could be a nice budget potential on your contending or middling rosters. With all that being said, I'm going to shut up and get out of here. Thank you guys. Appreciate the consistent support. We are coming at you with a video a day right now. I will see you for the strategy session this weekend. As always, I'll see you back tomorrow on Veteran Tight Ends to Sell video, followed by the quarterback series as we launch a bunch more real-life dynasty drafts here. If you're looking to play in a listener league, make sure you're in the Discord and let me know so that I can get you on the list. Appreciate the continued support. Drop a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know who you guys are buying and selling on the tight end market today, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.